Thank you. So I want to spend a few minutes just talking about emerging technologies. This first slide here really is what we call as our tech radar. So we've developed this as, for KPMG, really look at what are those emerging trends, not just right in front of us, meaning a year or two away, but we want to think much broader, right? We want to think 10, 15, 20 years away, and which we might just be talking about a technology right now, say 4D as an example, 4D printing as an example. But the idea here is we need to think about it now. What does it mean potentially for our organizations going forward? And then how do we look at, either creating centers of excellence to start researching these technologies, or even start working with our clients and kind of co-experimenting on some of these technologies in the very infancy. That way you get a good idea of how it's going to impact your organization and the value it could potentially bring. So you'll see some things out here in the 10 to 15 year radius, human augmentation, brain-computer interfaces, think Minority Report, right? Or The Matrix, where you start, kind of plugging something into the back of your skull and you immediately learn a new task. Right? It's probably not as extreme as that, but that brain-computer interface, it's an eventual technology. Whether or not it reaches mass adoption is a different story. So again, you'll see things out here that are pretty out there, pretty futuristic, but it's some things to think about for how they might apply to your businesses and your personal lives going forward in the future. I'm going to dig a little bit deeper into some things that are really here today. These are solutions and technologies that are impacting your business from multiple different fronts, right? So I'm not going to go through each of these items. I'll probably pick off a few of these. But blockchain as an example, everybody's hearing about blockchain. It's been kind of the latest, biggest technology everybody's talking about. A lot of people don't know what blockchain is, right? The idea of what blockchain is able to do is able to create a digital ledger of transactions. So think of it in a real estate transaction where I don't need paper anymore. I could do everything through a digital ledger and bring that information all into one immutable solution. So it's a distributed set of servers, so it can actually make sure that there's been no hacking and changes to those contracts as it was continuing through the process. We've actually done something really interesting with blockchain around climate accounting. So we've created a solution around climate accounting infrastructure where we can actually measure and monitor carbon emissions for a particular set of properties and then do carbon trading. So through that carbon trading, we're actually able to share credits. So if there's one organization who's burning less credits, they can carbon trade with somebody who's burning more to kind of offset their overall carbon emissions. So there's lots of great solutions that are coming up in the blockchain area. Cryptocurrency. Now, if you got in on very early in the cryptocurrency and started playing with Bitcoin and other some cryptocurrency mining, you're probably laughing right now. And when I was down in the dollars now, I think Bitcoin's up to 25,000, 24,000, somewhere along those lines. And we are seeing cryptocurrency as a before it was just your big tech geeks like me playing with these currencies, but now I think you're starting to see it really start to enter mainstream. Banks are now looking at it. Central banks of Europe and a few Asian countries are looking how do they integrate cryptocurrency into their overall monetary solutions. So you're going to continue to see the growth of crypto, and for your organization, there's a lot of places that are accepting cryptocurrency for payment these days, opposed to PayPal and other payment forms. Home healthcare. I think one of the big things that COVID's done is it's actually helped accelerate a lot of our healthcare solutions in the market. Prior, if you had a remote appointment with your doctor, it was never covered by insurance. That's all changed now due to COVID. With video appointments, interacting, we didn't want people coming into the hospitals. We wanted to remain at home, but still be able to interact with their doctors. We're also seeing other solutions where we're pushing medical devices to the home. We're working with one retailer right now who's looking at a kidney dialysis machine that is eventually now going to go to somebody's home and they'll be able to administer dialysis themselves, where they used to have to go to a clinic daily or weekly for the dialysis. Now they're going to be able to do that at home. So you're going to start seeing more of those technologies pushed closer to the patient so they can actually interact directly with the machines themselves And it also helps the provider significantly. So the provider can actually see daily activities in your blood glucose monitor, making sure you're doing your dialysis, et cetera. They're getting data and reports from those systems right into their EMS systems. So they're able to actually see your health, and if they see something or recognize something that's concerning to them, they'll reach out proactively. So again, you're going to continue to see that grow on and become much more dominant in the future. I'll just touch on too here, artificial and virtual reality. This is the AR, VR. Some of you probably have kids with an Oculus or some other virtual reality type solution. To be honest, it's not just for gaming anymore. You're seeing AR, VR, or even MR, which is mixed reality, start to apply to enterprises. We're starting to see a number of situations where industrial manufacturing clients are using mixed reality for the assembly of a jet engine, right? They're able to actually see a visual representation of that engine and actually do quality check of that product as it's being built. One thing we're actually really excited about at KPMG, we've just ordered what we call haptech suits. So this is in conjunction with an AR headset, but it's a full body suit that you actually put on and you can feel and experience different activities. So this is actually being used a lot for training in the Department of Defense. The fire police departments are utilizing these haptech suits. And then sporting is actually utilizing it as well to really monitor your athletes, how they're performing, and they can actually learn from their body movements how to train differently for those purposes. And one other thing we're starting to see, and it's very early in the healthcare space with these haptech suits, is they can actually help somebody move. So we think about rehab, right? So if I have a lower back issue, which unfortunately I do, and as David does, these haptech suits actually help you to move. So in physical therapy, you're moving yourself. This is not quite an exoskeleton. That's a little bit further out in the future, but it stimulates your muscles and contracts them, helping them to move as you're going through that physical therapy process. So even though that one's still very early in development, I think that's going to have significant impacts to training and the healthcare industry going forward. And then robotics and drones. I think everybody's heard about Amazon wanting to do delivery of packages. That's still a little bit further out there. Drones are not just for commercial use these days. Consumer use. Enterprises are starting to utilize these for inspections of facilities, et cetera, inspections of pipelines. There's many different applications, and we're only going to continue to see drones grow more rapidly going forward. So with that, I'm going to talk about 5G and IoT here shortly, but Rahsaan, I'll turn it over to you for any quick comments.
So Greg, what I think is so exciting is how you talk about truly these technologies we've heard about and things maybe we've even seen in movies that are actually coming to life and being hugely beneficial for the business. And that's really the impetus behind why we created Ignition nationally and specifically in Atlanta. So when you think about things like mixed reality, and you were talking about how it's being used in manufacturing, we're also using it to do leadership development, really to enable a new kind of inclusive leader and to teach empathy by allowing you to really operate in someone's shoes in a way that's immersed in experience, right? And so we're seeing that these technologies can be used across the spectrum in terms of how we impact people at every level in our organizations to advance what we're trying to do wherever you are in your business. The other is, if we think about the 5G lab that we have at Ignition and the things that we're able to try and be able to go from concept to execution, it is truly remarkable the things that we can ideate in that kind of an environment. And so I encourage you to not let kind of your thinking about what's possible disrupt or impair what you consider for this technology. I was playing golf with Stacey Lewis a year or so ago. actually, around about March this time last year. And we were working on the golf swing and looking at how the golf ball was able to read the impact and help adjust a swing, particularly mine, not hers. But it's just how this use of the technology is starting to be able to permeate really every aspect of how we interact. And the pandemic has highlighted the incremental use cases that have been advanced as well. And so, Greg, I'm excited for you to talk about now the next portion of your material so we can see those things applied.
Great, thanks, Rahsaan. And I'll just go up and throw a few more slides on the screen. So I'm going to do a bit more of a deep dive into IoT and 5G. That's why I kind of skipped over those two items on the screen. So when we think about IoT and 5G, a lot of people are thinking about the wearables that are on the wrist. You could be wearing a Fitbit, an Apple Watch, a Samsung, or a Whoop. And those are really the devices and the sensors, right? That's typically what most people think about when we're talking about IoT. They're just thinking about the data, the actual device itself. But it's so much more than that. And the enterprises need to think about, how does this actually transform my organization? So in an enterprise, and this really does apply to pretty much every single industry you could ever think about. But I'll just use healthcare as an example. We're going to deploy devices and sensors across the healthcare campus that is either monitoring the patient, the provider, monitoring the facilities for air quality, etc. So those are all the devices that are actually being deployed into the ether of the hospital campus, which is fantastic. But what do you do with all of that, right? These devices are generating massive amounts of data. So I need to be able to bring that into an environment where I can collect it, I can understand it, I can normalize it and process it. So the real objective of IoT is learning from the data that's coming off of all these sensors and devices that are spread across your enterprise, and interpret those into useful bites of insights. Once I have those insights, I can determine what actions do I need to take, right? From there, I think one of the things people don't really realize, and part of the challenge here is you're being approached by a device provider that's selling you a widget. They could be selling you a smart lighting widget. You're being approached by somebody else who's selling you a smart HVAC or smart parking solution. The important thing is you kind of really need to step back from that, and you have to have a clear strategy on how you're going to execute IoT, and what are those use cases that actually are going to bring the most value for your organization. Also, you can deploy thousands upon thousands of devices and try and address every use case under the sun, but to be honest, for your enterprise, that may not be the right thing to do. So really that strategy and operational phase, understanding again, which use cases I'm going to enable. Is it going to add economic value to my organization? Is it going to improve my customers' well-being or my employees' well-being? That's what's really going to help you kind of derive which use cases are going to add the most value. So, and then you can obviously see here on the screen, there's lots of other components that are actually involved in that process. Automation using robots. So if you're in a industrial manufacturing scenario or even healthcare for robotic surgery, you're going to have devices and sensors on those assets that are actually interpreting data and making split-second decisions on what action they need to take next. Blockchain, there's been a lot of conversations about blockchain. How does that fit into the IoT ecosystem? One great scenario that we've actually been working with some, I'll use the COVID-19, the distributions of vaccines, right? They need to be maintained at a certain level of temperature for Pfizer and Moderna, and through the entire life cycle. So as they leave the biopharmacy and hit the trucks and then get to the actual destination at Kroger, Walmart, wherever they're going, they need to be kept at a certain temperature. If they go outside that certain temperature, that entire batch could be wasted. So blockchain actually helps you track that through the entire process and provides you that verifiable data. The temperature was consistent all the way through the process. And then you also need to think about the people and the enterprise. Who is going to be using these solutions? What's the impact to them, right? Is it going to be positive? Is it going to be negative? And then how do you apply that across your organization? And then you go to the applications and cloud platform layers. I think one of the biggest challenges like I said, with most enterprises are they're being approached by 20 or 30 different suppliers selling a widget. If I own a building or a hospital, I can't be swivel sharing between 20 different platforms. So you need to have a clearly defined approach and how I'm going to aggregate all of that data and then represent that in a useful way to the consumers of that information. And that can be either through interactive platforms. You might end up setting up what we call a digital twin of a building. So if you're a building owner, building manager, you might want to have a digital twin of your building. So it allows you to see everything that's going on and actually interact directly with the building from there as well, right? And you got to automate such tasks through the platform of if somebody's left a particular room and the room empty for about 5 minutes, you can take an immediate action to shut the lights down, turn the air conditioning down, etc. Right? And that all starts to contribute towards the benefit of some of your sustainability goals that you might have as an enterprise. So there's plenty of applications IoT actually brings and can bring to light. So just on the topic of 5G, everybody's heard about 5G. You've all seen the commercials from T-Mobile, Verizon, AT&T, and others. And that's all from a consumer standpoint, which is great. 5G is really going to be transformational for the consumer. I can download a video, a high definition video that might have taken me 16 minutes on an iPhone. Now it's going to download in about 4 to 6 seconds, right, on a true 5G network. I will say that most of the networks that are out there today, that they're more like 4G plus. They're not quite true 5G yet, but that's almost there from the consumer standpoint. What most people don't know is 5G was really designed for the enterprise. Enterprises today are connected either through wired networks or Wi-Fi. You're seeing some other unlicensed spectrum solutions like LoRa, which is a low bandwidth type solution, low cost IoT sensors and devices that you deploy. They come on and send kilobytes of data, once or twice a day, and then they shut back down. Great things, the battery life on those are, 5 to 10 years. So depending on the application, a LoRa network may be very useful. But for 5G, it really starts to converge the worlds of wired networks, Wi-Fi networks, and cellular networks together. It's providing you ultra reliable communications, high bandwidth, low latency capabilities, which are going to be very important in a lot of applications going forward. And it provides you the ability to add millions upon millions of sensors, right? Now, most enterprises aren't going to deploy millions of sensors, but you think about a city's looking at deploying IoT, smart city type solutions. You can very quickly get up into the millions of devices depending on the applications you're actually trying to enable. So this graph here really starts to demonstrate who are the early movers. And the one that's not on here is really the federal government. The federal government's the earliest mover. You're already seeing a lot of 5G applications, 5G test beds that are being built for the Department of Defense, as well as other branches of the federal government. They're again looking at, 5G gives me almost unlimited bandwidth, gives me very reliable networks that Wi-Fi cannot provide, and also provides me that ultra low latency capability. Manufacturers, you're starting to see a lot of them move right now. John Deere just made an announcement that they're moving forward with deploying private LTE and private cellular 5G into a number of their factories. Over in Europe, Volkswagen Group has actually been a very early mover, as well as the BMW Group. Very early movers in adopting private 5G networking solutions in their enterprise. Now, I will say we're still very early. Some of the, if you're looking to deploy a private 5G network for your company itself, a lot of times you're going to have to go to the carriers right now. They're the ones that host all the spectrum and are able to enable a lot of these capabilities. Yet there is something called CBRS, which is a citizen band radio spectrum that enterprises can utilize to deploy it for themselves. That's what we actually have in our Atlanta Ignition Center. We've set up a CBRS private LTE, which is 5G ready when the standards are finalized. So it allows us to actually work with clients and test out this private cellular network solution. So we've done that ourselves along with a hardware OEM and have that infrastructure up and running at Ignition. And we've got 2 other locations we're going to be deploying it into to very soon. Again, the intention there is we want to be able to partner with clients to be able to test out these private cellular networks and the advantages that they'll bring. You'll also see on here healthcare. Healthcare is kind of in the center space for adopting these technologies. This report was done in 2019. I think you're going to start seeing them very quickly move to the left side. We're working with a number of healthcare providers and understanding how can they utilize private cellular networks for remote triage centers that, we all saw during COVID. You were setting up a tent in a parking lot or in a field somewhere, which was all great, but you ran into the issue of connectivity. So you're seeing wires run all over the place, which is just an ineffective way to manage your connectivity. The one great thing is the carrier stepped up. They deployed COWs, which are basically remote wireless solutions, using their public networks to actually provide that transmission. But I think healthcare going forward, they're going to look at these private 5G networks as a disaster recovery type solution for these remote triage scenarios. But then also for the hospital campus itself, right? There's almost infinite use cases you could enable across it. So I'm not going to go in the other industries. We're more than happy to talk with you all about what you're seeing and hearing from that perspective and how it's impacting even your enterprise. So just to contextualize a little bit, I already gave you a number of options here of different industries that are adopting IoT and private networks. As I mentioned, healthcare, we're starting to see them as they've been adopting IoT for a while now, both from a patient side, provider side, as well as a hospital campus side. But you're also starting to see a lot more utilization of wearable tech. We just completed a project for a healthcare up in the Northeast to replace all their biometrics systems with wearables. And it's a wearable that actually attaches to your rib cage. It's a throwawayable device, so you don't have to worry about sanitization and that, but it really monitors that patient, not necessarily just while they're at the hospital, but as they leave the hospital itself as well. Cities and spaces, you think about buildings, you get a smart building, private LTE and private cellular has a great opportunity in a new infrastructure build. If I don't need to deploy wired and Wi-Fi networks, or might deploy a hybrid of that, but if I don't deploy Cat5, conduit, Cat6 into my building, I can save a significant amount of money. So I can replace all communications in that new facility with a private LTE or 5G network that provides me the exact same capabilities as wired networks. There's some pretty economic benefit to doing that. Again, industrial manufacturing, they're the early movers on this. They're obviously leveraging IoT and private networks in their facility to monitor the supply chain, the inbound inventory coming in of the raw materials. On the factory floor, monitoring the articulating robots, the conveyor belts, etc. And then even on the outbound side, as their product starts to enter the market, they want to be able to get a good view into how that product's being consumed and how it's being utilized in the space. Tech, media, and telecom, I'm not necessarily going to go into them too much. They're the leaders in the market, right? When you talk about IoT and private networks, telecom, they've been doing this for ages, so is technology companies. Media, not so much, but they're very early movers in this. Then you've got a lot of other industries that are looking at IoT, and even though we've got them as emerging industries, we're starting to see a significant uptick. Government, the challenge with the smart city space was the economics behind it. I think the economics are getting better now, looking at adopting these technologies going forward. Oil and gas, we're actually seeing a number of oil and gas providers adopting IoT to monitor the pipeline, monitor the refineries, and as well as deploying those private networks into the facilities itself. Higher education, they got hit pretty hard as a result of COVID. Some students did come back at a lower capacity. With higher education, the bigger their revenue drivers is the sports programs. With all those stadiums empty throughout the year, it had a dramatic impact to them economically. So they've been looking at adopting IoT and different types of solutions to be able to make sure fans are able to come back in a very safe and effective manner. We've heard that some organizations or some universities are looking to go back to full capacity. With that, if they want to go back to full capacity, they need to be able to have contact tracing type solutions to monitor if there is somebody who becomes COVID positive after. Who were they in and around? So there's solutions that are actually being deployed to help with that. I think one of the big things with 5G and the security it actually provides, and I think there's been a question on that, so I'll just kind of respond to that pretty quickly. 5G it's a cellular network, so it's inherently more secure than your wired or Wi-Fi networks. You can't walk in and plug into a 5G network. These are all pre-provisioned, so if I'm going to connect a device into the network, it has to be authorized to actually connect. And one of the great things is with 5G, you're actually able to create a network segment. So you can actually create networks within networks within networks. So in that scenario, if I can create a network that's just dedicated for all my IoT sensors and devices and put them in a bucket. I might have another network that is for video. So if I want to, it's a higher bandwidth usage. If I'm doing facial recognition or something like that, I want to be able to see that's instantaneous. So I can set up a separate network slice for that. So I'm able to actually see or change the quality of service. So it's not constricted by bandwidth issues as it is today on the Wi-Fi network. I think the other thing on the security side too is there's many different solutions on the device side. Everybody's heard about probably one of the large retailers that had a hack. And probably 3 or 4 years ago, they came in through the HVAC system and got over into the point of sale system for that retailer. When you have these network slices, you're not going to be able to jump from network to network to network. You're going to be contained. So it does provide you an extra level of security. I'll never say 5G is going to provide you all the security in the world, but it's definitely increasing your capability. I think people as enterprises are looking to adopt IoT and private enterprise networks. They need to be thinking about cyber all the way through the process, and it needs to be integrated into the fabric of the solution you actually produce. So with that, I'm going to pass it back over to Rahsaan to talk a little bit more about Ignition and see questions come up. I'll go ahead and answer those.
Hey, Greg, I think it's great how you talked about we as people become the endpoint, right? And so if I go back to my old telco days, right, we had all the endpoints, we managed the endpoints. Managing people as the endpoint is infinitely more challenging, but creates such a plethora of opportunity as a result. And to your point on the way you can slice the networks with 5G and the level of security and data privacy it enables is also fantastic. It just is a foresight into the complexity then that it begets, right? And making sure that you're managing and planning for that from the beginning is going to be critical to your ability to achieve the desired outcome. But I did have one question before we switch it over completely to Ignition, which is around the question that was asked around the lack of rural broadband and if that slowed it down. And I know being an ag person originally myself, I've definitely seen how some of our leading ag science clients and others in the industry are really embracing 5G and IoT to really help them drive efficiency in the process, really with a lens to ESG and what we're doing around the environment, and really thinking also around kind of the governance of the entirety of the food chain process. But any thoughts on that?
Yeah, that's an interesting one. I think I agree. Ag tech is going to be they're going to be an early adopter of private LTE and 5G simply because they're in remote locations, right? There's not going to be any commercial cellular available in a lot of cases. And you're seeing more and more providers start to deploy IoT sensors to monitor, soil saturation, soil quality, runoff, pesticide monitoring, again, lots of different use cases you can apply. But you've also got a lot of autonomous tractors out there that are continuing to emerge.
Mm-hmm.
John Deere, Kabuto, and a few others actually built this technology into their products as well. And you have to have that connectivity, that cellular connectivity, providing you that reliable wireless communication. So as a farmer, I could go ahead and deploy, which is great. I actually grew up as a farmer ages ago, but I wish the technology existed back then when I was, baling hay. That was not fun. But anyways, but deploying those 5G networks into my agriculture environment provides me that connectivity. And I don't have to have that provided by the carrier, right? As long as there's spectrum there's spectrum all over the world. I would just either get that from the carrier or use CBR as an example, and I can do this all myself, right? So it's leveraging spectrum that's already available in the market, and it's providing me that direct connectivity in my specific location. Now, I see there was a question on broadband in the rural areas. We've been talking to a mining company who's actually deploying private 5G across all of their mines, both above ground and below ground. And one of their priorities was the communities around me, right?
Okay.
I've got people who are living in the mine, near the mine. How do I expand the footprint of my private network to actually provide that broadband capability to residents in that area? And that's very, that's kind of the S of the ESG, right? The social aspect. How do I leverage these types of capabilities to get closer to not just my employees, but actually, really drive an incremental difference to the people around me, right? I think the carriers have a significant responsibility to continue to expand their rural environment. I think you're starting to see low orbit satellites actually that are going to really start to make 5G or broadband available in very remote locations. And that's, I think, can't remember, SpaceX planning to deploy close to 100 low orbit satellites this year. So you're going to start seeing those issues diminish, but it's probably quite a few years away before you're getting true, nationwide coverage or even global coverage. You're probably 5 to 10 years away before you're going to have a reliable communications in all those remote areas.
Perfect. Thank you, Greg.
Great.
So, when you think about Ignition and what we built it for, it was really to create a space for us and for our clients to be able to immerse themselves, leveraging a suite of professionals from all different backgrounds to come up with these very leading edge ideas and actually take them from ideation to prototype in a rapid fashion. And to do that, it requires not only a differentiated kind of place to work, it is at its foundation, it necessitates different types of technology available and even space available to be creative. And so if we bring up the slides, that's what we really aim to do. And we did that in Atlanta because Atlanta is rich with talent from all backgrounds. So as David mentioned, we've got these remarkable automation experts, but that's also grounded in with nurses and doctors who understand what is necessary in healthcare and how automation can actually bring value. It's also connected to people who are focused on digital strategy and human interaction with digital assets to understand how we actually get to the root of the problem and solve it with technology-based solutions. And it's really evolving the face of all things. And so I hope that through the examples that Greg showed you and kind of some of the imagery we're trying to show you here, you start to appreciate how these technology concepts and ideas are no longer around the edge. They're becoming core to everything that we do. And we is not just us at KPMG in our business, it's we as humans in everything that we do. So in your business, I would challenge you that if your teams are coming to you with solutions and they haven't accounted for how they're going to leverage these emerging technologies, that you're asking the hard questions and that you're pushing them to think differently, and you're really creating the space for that creativity, knowing that in this early phase, that space necessitates a little bit of agility and the opportunity to try and fail forward so that you can get to that sweet spot that allows you to just have disruption that catapults your business forward. And so we're here and we'd love to help you think through just kind of the notion of it. And I'd love for you to hear from Ashley from our team, who can talk to you about examples where we've seen this magic happen with the coming together of capabilities to solve real problems in our community and in our industries. Ashley?
Thank you, Son. And I learned something new every time I get on a call. Greg, I didn't know you had a farming background. I grew up on a farm as well. And this time of year with hay is the bane of my existence back in those days. So it's probably an ag tech conversation between you and I. I'm glad to be with all of you today. And as Rahsaan mentioned, and as Greg had put it before, if you think back to that technology radar at the very beginning, where all of those different emerging tech solutions are hitting us, where we're trying to learn something about them, but moreover, trying to learn what to do about them and applied innovation. So yeah, thank you for that. So you see a huge variety of topics. And so several years ago, the firm went on a journey of listening to our folks, as professionals, as well as our clients, to try to understand the conversation and do something about it. So what we were hearing is people really need a place, sort of three things. They need a place to unpack these problems, to really ideate, to take different perspectives and advantages into a workshop type environment where they would end up with a real hypothesis or two to explore. And then in the second phase, we really focused on making it real to an MVP, to a prototype type output where you're combining real data from live in-session data analysis using our data, but also your data, and seeing what the different insights could be. And we've had lots of calls around that, but in short, we've seen 2 or 3 day session accelerate to 6 months of what somebody could do outside, and the insights that I got from that in all industries. And then lastly, you've got this great MVP and you're ready to stroke a check to build it. You've got to have a place to build it. And so what we heard is people were like, we work differently than cubes. And now we're interestingly all looking at what our workforce and workplace looks like. So we developed this a center. There's actually 4 in Denver, Chicago, New York, and now in Atlanta. We've been open about 4 years actually. And so that's where we build it. That's where we bring all the folks together to really create a viable product and work on changing the business model to really put things as applied innovation. So, this year, particularly at this time, we're in this sort of 1 year Go Virtual anniversary, and we pivoted fast when this happened. We developed a suite of software so that we could have client experiences that were powerful, that weren't just presentations, that helped people make decisions and get smart on, as well as on all of these different topics. But as I call it, the Monday morning coffee routine, understanding how they fit together. Which one in sequence do you put resources and devote time towards, and why? So, and looking to the future, we are at KPMG Ignition developing our hybrid model. This is a combination of skilled facilitation, product production quality, AV, as well as blending design thinking and storytelling. Storytelling is a big piece of that middle phase I mentioned. We have lots of examples from industry using data where the metaphors and those models help you break through some of the barriers that you're stuck in your own thinking, and break through there. And I just wanted to reiterate quickly too, Greg mentioned we do have an operational private LTE 5G ready enterprise system that we experiment on. So on topic today, we're diving into that. But as you look at this radar, you can see, there's not one of these that we're not either working on or developing, our perspective and where we think it's actually going to go. So I'll pause there and take it back to maybe all three of us, or we may field some questions.
Great. Actually, there was a question that came in around, has there been any unintended consequences of organic growth of IoT? I'd probably say, I don't know if there's been any negative experience associated with IoT. I think it comes down to, as an organization is thinking about adopting IoT and even private networks, they need to have that clear strategy and path going forward. But they need to be thinking about, again, what are the use cases they're going to enable? And then what does it mean for both their employees and the enterprise itself? From there, as you start deploying either proof of concepts or some of these devices and sensors in the market, you're going to constantly have to be doing a gut check, right? Is this solution actually providing me, economic value to my business, or is it improving my employee quality of life, et cetera? So you're going to have to think about it. I guess one negative consequence is in the autonomous vehicle space, Some people were jumping there far too quickly. Autonomous vehicles are not quite there yet, and I think Tesla just came out and said that their autonomous vehicle, their autopilot's actually L2. There's five levels of autonomous vehicles, L5 being the top. So, just being careful there about adopting technology too quickly before it's really mature is going to be a very, very important factor.
And Greg, I would say, if we think about a negative or unintended consequence, again, we talked about at the beginning, really challenging yourselves in your business to be thinking about that strategy and making sure you're aware. I've seen where people apply IoT-enabled devices to their network, not realizing that they've applied it to their network, and it creates significant chatter, for lack of a better term. And having been in the network monitoring space in my past life as well, you can all of a sudden have a storm of activity that you don't know what to do with, and data that's coming at you that can be received as a negative when it's just new information you're being exposed to. So making sure that you're really intentional, again, asking those questions of your team to make sure that you understand what you're bringing in and plugging into your networks. You're the old one or your new one, just to make sure that you're really focused on that. What is we have a question. A practical example of IoT use in the business. Greg, you want to take that one?
Yeah, I'll give you an example in the industrial manufacturing space. So we've actually seen a lot of industrial manufacturers adopt IoT at a very rapid scale, right? Again, to monitor their articulated robots, the product quality. I think the biggest impact for them is as a product is being manufactured, there's a lot of waste produced, right? And that could be excessive vibration on the conveyor belt, the articulated robot, what the printing press, whatever scenario it is. But being able to actually have sensors on those devices and identify potential issues, like, again, excessive vibration, I can take immediate action as a floor operator, go ahead and shut down that manufacturing line and repair that asset. So that obviously reduces very quickly your waste, product waste that you're producing during the manufacturing life cycle. And, it improves long-term uptime of your factory as well, right? It's very costly when a component goes down and it's unplanned. You might have your line down for days in some cases. But if you've got that predictive monitoring, so you can be able to identify potential failures and be proactive, shut it down, do the repair during an off shift, you're going to have a much better result and a lower
rate. Yeah, absolutely. The same example in the energy space with a client who was really able to deploy IoT to get in front of repairs that is particularly at very remote and disparate locations that allow you to predict breakdown in advance and deploy in an organized fashion how you bring things offline. We see what happens when you don't have all that intel, like in the things that have happened over the course of this past year. In other cities, we've had our challenges in the past too, but being able to really stay in front of that in a meaningful way is critical, and is a way that you can drive huge impact in your business, no matter what it is: services, production, industrial, energy, healthcare, anything. So, and I think we might be at time.
Well, you are. Well, Greg, Rahsaan, Ashley, great program. I mean, our theme for the year is investing for tomorrow today, and you are giving just great tangible examples and theoretical examples of, what is going on technology and Internet of Things and 5G. So great content, great discussion. Thank you. We had a couple other questions, but maybe just, one or two here. I mean, it looks like 4G and 5G will coexist for a while. So, where do you, for like major hospitals or institutions that have invested a lot in kind of the legacy, what will become legacy infrastructure, how fast do they move over? When does 5G phone pricing get more affordable? Maybe just outline a little bit about that coexistence for a while.
Yeah, absolutely. They're going to coexist for a very, very long time. There's even 3G networks still available in the market too for some communications. And I think for the enterprise, even though all the discussions around 5G today, right? But in reality, if I can deploy a private LTE network into my enterprise today, it's probably 70% of the use cases you would want to enable across that, you can enable perfectly fine on an LTE network. It's only the certain use cases that require that ultra low latency, extreme high bandwidth, say video production, etc., that you're really going to want to have 5G for. So, like I said, people can move now. Again, depending on which use cases that they're looking to enable. And then as 5G is truly available for the enterprise, then there's a whole other suite of use cases that are being enabled beyond that as well.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Yeah. Oh, go ahead, Ashley.
No, I was just going to say, if you're on the cusp of an investment, you really need to take a hard look, right? Like invest once. If you've already made the investment, it's really looking at what are those trigger points in your business plan that necessitate kind of that trade-off of the investment at that window, because cost will abate as it always does, right? But figuring out those trigger points where having access to that capacity will actually significantly elevate your ability to impact the market through your business model.
Got it. Well, many topics to discuss. I think we'd love to have you back a year from now. Let's measure where we are, what's changed, what's developed, what are those surprises. There are going to be many surprises along the way. But right now, I just want to thank the three of you as well as David for joining us today on what was an incredibly fascinating topic. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you.
Absolutely.